ವರಲೀಲಗಾನಲೋಲ ಸುರಪಾಲ ಸುಗುಣಜಾಲ ಭರಿತ ನೀಲಗಳ ಹೃದಾಲಯ ಶ್ರುತಿಮೂಲ ಸುಕರುಣಾಲ ಬಾಲಪಾಲಯ ಶುಮ. ವರಲೀಲಗಾನಲೋಲ ಸುರಪಾಲ ಸುಗುಣಜಾಲ ಭರಿತ ನೀಲಗಳ ಹೃದಾಲಯ ಶ್ರುತಿಮೂಲ ಸುಕರುಣಾಲ ಬಾಲಪಾಲಯ ಶುಮ. ನರರಕ್ಷ ನೀರಜಾಕ್ಷ ವರರಾಕ್ಷಸ ಮದ ಶಿಕ್ಷಕ ಸುರಯಕ್ಷ ಸನಕ ಋಕ್ಷ ಪತಿನುತಾಕ್ಷ ಹರಣ ಪಕ್ಷ ದಕ್ಷ ಶಿಕ್ಷಕ ಪ್ರಿಯ. ನರರಕ್ಷ ನೀರಜಾಕ್ಷ ವರರಾಕ್ಷಸ ಮದ ಶಿಕ್ಷಕ ಸುರಯಕ್ಷ ಸನಕ ಋಕ್ಷ ಪತಿನುತಾಕ್ಷ ಹರಣ ಪಕ್ಷ ದಕ್ಷ ಶಿಕ್ಷಕ ಪ್ರಿಯ. ರಘುರಾಜ ತ್ಯಾಗರಾಜ ನುತರಾಜ ದಿವಸರಾಜ ನಯನ ಭೋಜ ಗದವನಾಜ ಜನಕ ರಾಜ ಜಾವಿರಾಜ ರಾಜ ರಾಜ ಪೂಜಿತ. ರಘುರಾಜ ತ್ಯಾಗರಾಜ ನುತರಾಜ ದಿವಸರಾಜ ನಯನ ಭೋಜ ಗದವನಾಜ ಜನಕ ರಾಜ ಜಾವಿರಾಜ ರಾಜ ರಾಜ ಪೂಜಿತ. ತ್ಯಾಗರಾಜ ಪೂಜಿತ ತ್ಯಾಗರಾಜ ಪೂಜಿತ. ಶ್ರೀ ಗುರುಭ್ಯೋ ನಮಃ. This is one of Thyagaraja Swami's very different compositions where he talks about Lord Rama but approaches the ragam this is set in Shankarabharanam in a very light style, almost in a westernized format with a lot of plain notes as opposed to the normal Carnatic handling with a lot of gamakas and weight in its handling. So it shows his dexterity in handling such a versatile ragam Shankarabharanam and it's in all its colors. Further, it's also written in Sanskrit and has a lot of typical quintessential Dikshitar stylistic traits as well. Here he talks about Rama as Neelagala Hridalaya, the one whose sanctum or residence is the heart of Neelakantha or Lord Shiva. And further he says Akshaharana Paksha, the one who has sided with Hanuman, who is a Shankaravatara, and Daksha Sikshaka Priya, the one who is beloved to the one who taught Daksha a lesson, which is Lord Shiva again. So this composition gives us a peek into the great fondness that Rama had for Lord Shankara and vice versa, and more relevantly, the great affection that Thyagaraja Swami had towards both these deities. And I think it's very relevant also to note that Thyagaraja Swami lived at a time where a lot of people were trying to establish one of these deities as greater than the other. But Thyagaraja Swami vehemently opposed this stance and propagated his philosophy, which is that Shankara and Lord Rama are no different from each other. In fact, in a kriti in Begada, he describes the qualities of true bhaktas. He says, Bhaktuni charitramu vinave. And when describing the qualities, he says, Harihara bhedamu jayaga radu. It doesn't do for a true devotee to make any distinction between Hari and Hara. And this is a philosophy that he also followed and preached. So in line with this, today we're going to see Lord Shankara as one, a friend and worshipper of Lord Rama, and two, as one and the same as Lord Rama. Two angles that Thyagaraja Swami himself brings out in his many kritis. So we'll see these in two segments. The first segment will be Shankara as a friend and worshipper of Lord Rama. We saw a lot about this last week itself, how Shankara took the incarnation of Hanuman and came to earth to befriend and to serve the Lord Rama as his devotee. And in many kritis, Thyagaraja Swami has also mentioned how Rama and Shiva delight each other mutually. We're going to just look into some of these kritis briefly now. In a kriti in the ragam Mukhari, Muripemu Kalige, Thyagaraja Swami says, Muripemu Kalige kada Rama? Are you feeling very proud and pretentious? Too pompous to heed my prayers, Rama? And when he explains why Rama might have become so pompous, he says, Varamaina Panchanadapura Dhamuni Chentanu Vasinchutakai ni Madinanchaga Muripemu Kalige kada. Which means, visualizing the Lord Ranganatha and Srirangam as Rama, Thyagaraja Swami says, just because you found yourself a luxurious residence like Srirangam, just because you've settled down in a kshetra right next to Tiruvayar, where your beloved friend Shiva's Panchanadishwara stays, you've gotten so comfortable and high-headed, Rama. Is that why you're not heeding to my cries and prayers? And we should note that both these kshetras, Srirangam and Tiruvayar, are situated on the banks of the river Kaveri in Tamil Nadu. Thyagaraja Swami had a great love for this river Kaveri and its banks because he spent a massive chunk of his life in this region. And further, the river Kaveri has also been described and glorified in the Valmiki Ramayanam itself. There is a segment in the Kishkinda Kandam, where Sugriva describes its greatness and says, Divyam prasanna salilam Shivam tatra drikshyatha Kaveri. You will see the auspicious river Kaveri having pleasant waters where divine apsaras or celestial maidens come to sport. And it's common knowledge that Thyagaraja Swami was heavily inspired by the Valmiki Ramayanam, so maybe this also contributed to his great affinity for this river. And Thyagaraja Swami has even written an entire kriti about Kaveri in the ragam Asaveri, where he sings the glories of this river, and there he says, Sari vedelena ee Kaveri ni chudare. Come, behold this magnificent river Kaveri which flows here. And then he goes on to describe the beauty and the flow of Kaveri. Further he says, Veduchu Rangeshu Nijuchi, having beheld Ranganatha along her banks upstream Kaveri in Srirangam, Mari Iredu Jagamulaku, Jeevanamaina Moodu Rendu Nadinathuni Juda, Sari Vedalena E Kaveri ni Judare. Which means, after seeing Ranganatha and Srirangam, watch Kaveri as she rushes from upstream to downstream to the town of Tiruvayyar to behold the great Lord Shiva as Panchanadishwara, who is the life source of all 14 worlds. So he sort of brings out how close Lord Shankara and Mahavishnu are, both in their intimacy and in the proximity of their kshetras, and to do so he uses his great love for Kaveri as a common thread. In the second segment, we're going to also see Lord Shiva as one and the same as Rama, the unanimity between them. So Thyagaraja Swami in his kritis went beyond seeing Shiva as just Rama's friend and bhakta. To him, Lord Rama was not just an incarnation of Lord Vishnu, but an incarnation of Lord Shiva also infused. To him, Shankara and Rama were no different from each other, in fact. So to bring this out, there is a kriti in Devamrita Varshini where he sings about how Rama is this indecipherable greatness that mixes all the divinity of Shiva, Brahma and Vishnu, and he's not able to tell who's who. We'll hear a little bit of that kriti before we jump further into its meaning. Shivudano Madhavudano Shivudano Madhavudano Shivudano Madhavudano Kamala Bhavudano Kamala Bhavudano Kamala Bhavudano Parabrahmamano Oyavarani Nirnayinchirida Ninnetlara Dinchira Naravaru Lavarani So in this kriti, Thyagaraja Swami talks about the great oneness between the deities Rama and Shankara and says, Rama, I'm not able to decipher whether you're Shiva or Madhava or Brahma or the manifestation of the supreme divinity, the Parabrahman itself on earth. Who did people decide to worship you as Rama? I don't understand. And further, in the Charanam, he gives us a very secretive, beautiful symbolism where he says, the title Rama for you is nothing but a confluence of the life-giving syllable of the Panchaksharam, which is Ma, and the life-giving syllable of the Ashtaksharam of Lord Mahavishnu, which is Ra. So coming together of the sacred mantras of Shiva and Vishnu gives us the Rama Nama, and so you are nothing but a confluence of these two great divinities. Further, in a kriti in Saurashtram, Thyagaraja Swami goes on to even visualize Lord Rama as nothing but an incarnation of Shiva himself. He says, Deva Rama Rama, Mahadeva Rama. And further he explains in the Anupallavi, Bhavajari Rupa, Khela Bhava, Pavanava, Mahadeva Rama. Which means, Bhavajari is none other than the enemy of Manmatha, which is Lord Shiva. Bhavajari Rupa, Khela Bhava. You have assumed the form of Lord Shiva, the enemy of Manmatha, as a divine sport, as a game, when in fact, Deva Rama Rama, Mahadeva Rama, you are none other than Rama himself. And in the Charanam, he gives us different epithets to show the glory of Lord Shiva. The beauty of this is, he brings in the sound Shankara in so many different meanings. And this is part of the reason why this entire series was titled Shankaram Vashankaram, to communicate the great love that Thyagaraja Swami had for this particular name of Shiva as Shankara, the causer of welfare. So the Sahityam of the Charanam goes, Shankara, Karunakara, Anisham, Karadhrita Shara, Bhakta Vashankara, Danujahava Nishanka, Rasika Thyagaraja Deva Rama Rama. So if you notice, first he says Shankara, which is literally the name of the Lord. Anishankara, again, the confluence of those two words gives the sound Shankara. Then he says Vashankara, and finally Nishanka Rasika. So it's almost like he's finding excuses to chant the Shankara Nama again and again. Or rather he wants us to do that, to recite the Nama of Shankara as much as possible. So this again cements our idea that he had a great affinity for Lord Shiva as much as for Lord Rama, because to him, both of them were no different from each other. Shankara was the same as Lord Rama, as we see in this Kriti. So on this note of appreciating the unanimity between these two great divinities, I'd like to wind up our little exploration through the series titled Shankaram Vashankaram, submitting it as a humble offering to Saint Thyagaraja and his beloved Lords Rama and Shankara. Whatever little I may have shared through this series is from this vast ocean of Thyagaraja Swami's Bhakti, and it is only by the grace of Sadguru Thyagaraja. And further, I've taken up this theme so massive only out of my childish love for the subject and out of no expertise on the matter. So I do apologize for any shortcomings on my part through this journey. And also a big thanks to all of you, the audience, for staying with me throughout this journey and partaking in the bliss of Thyagaraja Bhakti. I pray that Lord Rama and Lord Shankara will grace us with their blessings today and always. We'll conclude this exploration with a very beautiful Kriti of Thyagaraja Swami, where he says that nobody knows the ambrosia, the nectar of Swara Raga and Laya, the essential components of music, mixed with the great sweet sugar called Rama Nama. Nobody knows to consume this and enjoy its bliss greater than Shankara. Which means to say that nobody enjoys chanting the Rama Nama more than Lord Shankara. So with that, in the beautiful Ragam Kapi, we'll conclude this exploration. Once again, thanks to all of you and my humblest namaskarams to Sadguru Thyagaraja Swami. Swararagalaya Sudharasamando Swararagalaya Sudharasam Ando Vararamana Kanda Chakera Meshamu Jesi Bhujache Shankaruniki Telu Sunu Vararamana Mane Kanda Chakera Meshamu భుజ శంకరునికి తెలుసును త్యాగరాజ వినుత ఇంత సౌఖ్యమని జపజాల ఎంతో ఏమో ఎవరికి తెలుసును